Liam had always loved the little creek that ran behind his house. It was quiet, clear, and full of life. Birds often perched on the low-hanging branches, and small fish swam near the edges. Every summer, Liam would sit by the water with a book or a fishing rod, enjoying the gentle sound of flowing water. It was his peaceful place, far from the stress of work or the noise of the neighborhood. One morning, after a week of planning, Liam decided to build a small dam. He imagined a little pond forming behind it, a place where his children could play and watch the water sparkle under the sun. He wanted it to be natural and safe, so he chose only rocks and logs, stacking them carefully. Over a few days, with sweat on his forehead and determination in his heart, he completed the dam. The water slowed down, forming a small, calm pond. Ducks visited from time to time, and wildflowers began to bloom along the edges. Liam's family loved it. His children laughed as they watched the water ripple, and his wife smiled, happy to see their own private nature spot. Everything seemed perfect until one Tuesday morning. Liam found an envelope slipped under his door. The letters from the HOA were usually polite reminders about grass trimming or parking rules, so he didn't think much of it at first. But when he opened it, his heart sank. The paper inside stated that he had been fined $50,000 for building a dam without permission. Liam's hands shook slightly as he reread the lines. The amount seemed impossible, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He read the letter again and again, hoping he had misunderstood. The HOA explained that no homeowner was allowed to alter water flow in the neighborhood, even in their own yard. The fine was steep, and the letter demanded that he remove the dam immediately. Liam sat on his porch staring at the pond he had created. He had never imagined that something meant to bring joy could be seen as a crime. He felt a mix of anger, confusion, and sadness. Over the next few days, Liam tried to talk to the HOA. He called the office, sent emails, and even visited the board members. Each time, he explained how small and harmless the dam was, how it helped wildlife, and how it created a peaceful place for his family. He pointed out that the water flow was carefully measured and no property would be damaged. But every time the answer was the same. The rules were strict and the fine would not be reduced. Liam left meetings feeling frustrated and exhausted. It wasn't just the money that upset him. It was the principle. He had followed his own careful plan, taken safety into consideration, and thought of the community in his small project. Yet the HOA treated him as though he had done something reckless or dangerous. He began to notice the other neighbors looking at him differently, some whispering when they passed by. The situation made him feel isolated, as if the peaceful neighborhood he loved had turned against him. At night, Liam couldn't sleep. He walked by the pond, listening to the quiet water and the occasional bird call. He thought about fairness, rules, and responsibility. He wondered if there was a way to solve the problem without giving up the place that had become so special to him and his family. But as the fine loomed over him like a dark cloud, he felt the first spark of determination. He wasn't going to give up easily. The pond had been built with care and love, and he believed that common sense should matter just as much as the rules on paper. The day passed, and Liam sat down with a notebook. He began to make sketches, notes, and plans. He wanted to understand exactly what would happen if he removed the dam or if the water was allowed to flow freely again. He knew he had to think carefully. The fine had changed everything, but it had also awakened a sense of purpose. Liam decided he wouldn't be pushed around. He wanted a solution that made sense not just for him, but for the entire neighborhood. By sunset, Liam was tired but focused. The pond reflected the orange sky, calm and beautiful, almost daring the world to take it away. He knew the fight ahead would be tricky, but he also knew one thing clearly. He loved this place and he would find a way to protect it, even if it meant challenging the rules that seemed unfair. After weeks of dealing with letters, phone calls, and cold stares from the HOA members, Liam began to feel a mix of frustration and determination. The $50,000 fine hung over him like a dark cloud, but more than that, he felt a deep sense of injustice. His pond had been built with care and love, and it brought joy to his family. He could not understand how something so harmless could provoke such harsh rules. One evening, Liam sat by the pond, watching the water ripple in the soft orange light of sunset. The ducks swam peacefully, the fish darted beneath the surface, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees. For a moment, he allowed himself to enjoy the calm. Then, as he watched the water move freely through the little creek, An idea began to take shape in his mind. Liam remembered that the creek did more than feed his pond. It connected to the neighborhood's water system, helping supply the HOA-managed gardens and small drainage channels. He realized that the water he had held back with the dam had quietly helped regulate the flow for many homes. If he removed the dam, he thought, the water would rush downstream again and the HOA would begin to see the consequences of their strict rules. He knew he had to be careful. Liam was not reckless and he did not want to cause real harm to anyone's property. But he also wanted the HOA to understand how their blind enforcement of rules could backfire. For the first time since receiving the fine, he felt a spark of control. Maybe there was a way to show the HOA the importance of balance without breaking any laws. Liam spent the next few nights making detailed sketches of the creek, the dam, and the water flow. He measured the pond, the rocks, and the surrounding area. He noted every small channel and drainage path that connected to the rest of the neighborhood. With each drawing, he began to understand the delicate balance of water management that the HOA had never considered. His plan was not just about removing the dam. It was about observing, learning, and demonstrating the effects in a safe way. When he shared his thoughts with Nora, his best friend, she raised her eyebrows. Nora had always been practical and cautious, and she listened carefully as Liam explained what he was considering. "You have to be very careful, Liam," she said. "If you remove the dam too quickly, it could make a big mess. You don't want to hurt anyone or make them angry." Liam nodded, appreciating her concern. "I know, Nora, I'm not going to rush it. I just want them to see what happens when rules are followed without thinking. I want them to understand the consequences of their actions." Over the next several days, Liam watched the creek closely. He recorded water levels, noted how quickly the water flowed, and even observed the wildlife. He wanted to make sure he had all the facts before taking any action. It was like being both a scientist and a storyteller, documenting the world so others could see it clearly. The more Liam studied, the more confident he became. He realized that the HOA's strict rules had created a small imbalance in nature, and removing the dam would gently highlight the importance of understanding systems rather than enforcing rules blindly. Liam also began to see his project as more than just a protest. It was an experiment in balance, observation, and education. By the time the weekend arrived, Liam had a full plan in mind. He knew exactly how to remove the dam safely, how to monitor the water as it flowed downstream, and how to take notes on what happened. He wasn't seeking revenge, he reminded himself. He was seeking understanding. That night, Liam went to bed with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The pond glimmered under the moonlight, quiet and still. Soon it would change, but Liam felt ready. He knew that with patience, care, and observation, he could turn a frustrating situation into a lesson that the entire neighborhood might remember. For the first time since receiving the $50,000 fine, Liam felt a sense of purpose. The dam had started as a simple project, a small pond for his family, but now it had become a tool for understanding, patience, and maybe, just maybe, fairness. As Liam's plan began to take shape, he felt a mix of excitement and worry. Every morning he would wake up and walk to the pond, watching the water glisten in the sunlight. It seemed peaceful, almost innocent, yet he knew that removing the dam could change everything downstream. He wanted to teach the HOA a lesson about fairness, but he also didn't want to hurt anyone or cause real trouble. Liam decided to talk to his best friend Nora, who had always been a voice of reason in his life. He invited her over one afternoon, hoping for guidance. Nora looked around at the pond, her eyes wide with curiosity. "It's beautiful, Liam," she said softly. "I can see why you built it. But messing with the water, are you sure that's a good idea?" "I've thought about it a lot," Liam replied. "I've been measuring the flow, observing the creek, and figuring out exactly what will happen if I remove the dam. I'm careful, Nora. I'm not trying to cause damage. I just want the HOA to understand that rules without reason can sometimes make problems worse." Nora sat down on the edge of the pond, dipping her fingers into the water. "I get that," she said. "But what if something goes wrong? What if water floods a garden or makes someone upset? You have to be prepared for that." Liam nodded, appreciating her caution. He didn't want to act recklessly, and Nora's words reminded him to think everything through. He decided to spend the next week observing even more closely. Each day he measured the water level at different points, watched how fast it flowed, and noted where puddles formed naturally. He also recorded how the wildlife reacted, the ducks, fish, and even small frogs that visited the pond. He wanted every detail to be known before he took any action. As he worked, Liam's mind was full of questions. Could the HOA understand the lesson if he acted too quickly? Would neighbors blame him for small problems even if they were minor? Could the balance of water in the neighborhood be disrupted in unexpected ways? These doubts weighed on him, but they also made him more careful. He realized that planning, observation, and patience were just as important as the action itself. One evening, Liam walked along the creek that led away from his pond. The water sparkled in the late sunlight, and the soft sound of flowing water made him feel calm. He thought about the $50,000 fine, the letters from the HOA, and the frustration he had felt. But now he also thought about responsibility. He wasn't going to act out of anger. He would act out of understanding. He wanted the HOA to learn, but he also wanted his family, neighbors, and himself to be safe. Nora visited again, this time bringing a notebook and a map of the neighborhood. Together they marked the water paths, noting where lawns might get wet and where the HOA gardens could be affected. "We can make a plan that is safe," Nora said, smiling. "We just need to understand the system fully." By the end of the week, Liam felt ready. The doubts had not disappeared, but they had transformed into careful preparation. He had learned the importance of patience, observation, and thinking ahead. Removing the dam was not a simple task. It was a test of planning and understanding. He knew that if he acted too hastily, the results could be unpredictable. But if he acted wisely, the lesson would be clear. That night, Liam sat by the pond, looking at the water reflecting the stars above. He thought about fairness, patience, and the value of careful planning. For the first time, he felt a quiet confidence. He would act, but he would act thoughtfully. The pond had become more than a project. It was a symbol of balance, responsibility, and the power of understanding before action. As Liam turned off the lights and went inside, he made a promise to himself. He would remove the dam carefully, monitor everything, and ensure that the lesson he was about to teach would not cause harm. The doubts were still there, but now they guided him, reminding him that wisdom and preparation were as important as courage. The next morning, Liam woke up with determination. The time to act was near, and he knew that with careful observation, thoughtfulness, and patience, he could show the HOA the importance of fairness without creating real trouble. The pond shimmered in the early sunlight, calm and still, waiting for the next step in Liam's careful plan. The morning sunlight fell gently on Liam's backyard as he put on his gloves and prepared the tools. Today was the day he would begin removing the dam. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. For weeks he had planned this carefully, measuring the creek, noting the water flow, and understanding every small ripple. He knew he had to act slowly and carefully to avoid any problems for the neighborhood. His children were playing nearby, curious about what he was doing. "Are you fixing the pond, Dad?" one of them asked. Liam smiled and shook his head. "Not exactly, it's a small change. I just want to see how the water flows again," he explained gently. His children nodded, trusting their father's careful work. Liam started by loosening the rocks at the edge of the dam. He removed them one by one, listening to the water trickle through the gaps. Slowly, the pond's level began to lower, and the water started moving toward the creek again. It was fascinating to watch. The calm, still pond that had reflected the sky and trees for so long was now transforming into flowing water. Liam felt both proud and cautious. As the water began to move faster, Liam noticed the ducks swimming happily in the shallow areas. Birds flew overhead and small fish darted to the deeper parts of the creek. The wildlife seemed to welcome the change. Liam smiled. He had hoped the pond and dam would help nature, and now it was clear that the creek itself was resilient and strong. He worked steadily, checking each stone and log carefully. It was slow work, but Liam wanted it to be safe. He remembered Nora's warning. Patience was important, and careful observation could prevent mistakes. Each movement of a rock, each adjustment of a log was part of the plan. He made notes in a small notebook, recording how quickly the water flowed and where small puddles were forming downstream. After a few hours, the dam was mostly removed. The pond was smaller now, and water rushed gently toward the creek. Liam stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. The sound of flowing water was louder now, rushing past rocks and into small channels that led into the neighborhood. He felt a sense of accomplishment. But he also knew the real test was just beginning. By the afternoon, Liam noticed small changes in the surrounding areas. A few paths near the HOA gardens had become muddy, and sprinklers were struggling to keep up with the returning water flow. He documented everything carefully. He didn't feel proud or angry. He simply observed. His goal was not to cause trouble, but to show how interconnected the water system was and how small changes could make a big difference. Neighbors began to notice the changes too. Some came over to Liam's yard, curious about what was happening. "Is everything okay with the pond?" one asked. Liam explained calmly that he was adjusting the water flow and watching how it affected the neighborhood. Most neighbors were intrigued and even excited to see the pond change and the creek move freely again. By the evening, the dam was completely removed. The water flowed naturally, filling the small channels, reaching lawns, and running past gardens. Liam sat on the edge of the creek, taking notes and observing quietly. The neighborhood looked different now, with small areas of mud and extra water glistening in the sunlight. He smiled, knowing that the lesson was beginning, and that patience, careful planning, and observation were key to understanding. As night fell, Liam stood by the creek watching the stars reflect in the water. The pond was no longer still, but the flowing water brought a new beauty to the neighborhood. He felt proud of his careful work and excited about what would come next. The HOA would soon see the consequences of their strict rules, but Liam knew he had acted responsibly. The first step had been taken. The dam was gone and the creek was flowing freely again. Liam went inside, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had acted thoughtfully, safely, and with care. The real story was only beginning, and he was ready to watch how the neighborhood would respond to the gentle flowing water that had once been held back. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with unusual activity. Small puddles had formed along the walkways. The lawns of some homes were wetter than usual, and a few sprinklers were spraying water at odd angles. The HOA members were already awake and moving quickly, their faces tense with worry. They had noticed the change in water flow almost immediately, and the news spread fast through calls, texts, and hurried meetings. Liam watched quietly from his porch, sipping a cup of coffee. He did not feel angry or triumphant. He felt calm and focused. This was exactly what he had expected, and he was curious to see how the HOA would respond. The water that had been carefully managed by the neighborhood's regulations was now flowing naturally again, and everyone was beginning to feel the effects. Within an hour, a small group of HOA board members arrived near Liam's house, pacing and talking in hurried tones. They inspected the areas where puddles had formed and the gardens that seemed to struggle with the change. "What happened here?" one member exclaimed. "The water system was working fine yesterday," another added. "Did someone tamper with the creek?" Liam stayed on his porch, calm and composed. He knew the board would start connecting the dots soon. The water from his pond was now feeding the channels that ran across the neighborhood, and the minor disruptions were a direct result of the dam being removed. Yet he had done everything carefully, ensuring no serious harm occurred. He wanted the HOA to see the natural consequences without anyone being in danger. Some neighbors came out of their homes, curious and concerned. They noticed the mud along the paths and the unusual flow of water. A few of them walked to Liam asking, "Did you do something to the creek, Liam?" He smiled gently and nodded. "Yes, I removed the dam to let the water flow naturally again. I'm just observing how it affects the neighborhood." The reactions were mixed. Some neighbors were impressed by Liam's careful observation and planning. They admired his thoughtfulness and how he had handled the situation responsibly. Others, particularly the HOA board members, were frustrated and confused. They had never considered that a small dam could have such an impact, and now they were forced to rethink the way they managed the neighborhood's water system. Meetings were called, phone calls were made, and emails flew back and forth. The HOA board was in a state of mild panic, trying to address the wet lawns, the overflowing sprinklers, and the curious neighbors. Liam watched the events unfold quietly, documenting everything in his notebook. He didn't gloat. He simply observed. He wanted the HOA to understand that enforcing strict rules without considering natural systems could lead to unintended results. By the afternoon, a few board members approached Liam directly. They were more composed now, but still looked uneasy. "Liam, can you explain exactly what happened?" one asked. Liam calmly described how the pond and the dam had affected water flow throughout the neighborhood. He showed them notes and sketches, explaining how removing the dam allowed water to follow its natural path, creating small disruptions but also balancing the system. The board members listened carefully, though some were still hesitant to admit their oversight. They had acted quickly and strictly without considering the consequences, and now they were beginning to realize that the natural system of the creek had been helping maintain balance all along. Liam felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He wasn't seeking revenge. He simply wanted understanding. By evening, the neighborhood had calmed somewhat, though the water still flowed freely through the paths and gardens. The HOA was starting to reconsider its approach, and the neighbors were discussing the situation with interest. Liam sat by the creek watching the gentle movement of water, knowing that the lesson had begun. He had acted responsibly and carefully, and the natural system was now demonstrating the consequences of ignoring balance and understanding. As night fell, Liam felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The pond was gone, the creek was flowing naturally, and the HOA was beginning to see the impact of their rules. The first part of his plan had worked perfectly, and he knew the next steps would be even more important in helping the neighborhood learn patience, balance, and understanding. The morning after the dam was removed, Liam noticed something interesting. Neighbors were talking, pointing at the flowing water and moving cautiously along the paths. Some were curious, others confused, but all were paying attention. The neighborhood had changed subtly, not dramatically, but enough for people to notice that the creek's natural flow was different now. Liam walked slowly along the edge of the creek, observing the movement of water and the reactions of the neighbors. Small puddles had formed in areas that were usually dry, and some of the HOA-managed gardens were wetter than normal, but everything was safe. No damage had occurred. The water was simply returning to its natural path, balancing itself as it had before the dam was built. He smiled quietly, realizing that the lesson he hoped to teach was starting to take shape. For years, the HOA had followed rules strictly, without thinking about the effects. Now they were seeing firsthand how small changes could impact the whole neighborhood. Liam knew that people often understood lessons better when they experienced them, rather than just hearing about them. A few neighbors approached him cautiously. "Liam," one said, "I noticed the water is moving differently now." "Was it the pond?" "Yes," Liam replied calmly. "The dam held the water back, and now that it's gone, the creek is flowing naturally. It affects the paths and some gardens, but it's all part of the balance. Nature has its way of finding harmony." Some neighbors nodded, beginning to understand. Others looked thoughtful, realizing that perhaps the HOA had overlooked the bigger picture. Liam explained patiently how the small dam had helped regulate water flow, and how removing it caused the minor puddles and wet areas. "It's not about breaking rules," he said gently. "It's about understanding how everything works together. Water, gardens, paths, and even our homes are connected." Even some of the HOA members started visiting Liam's yard to see the creek for themselves. They observed quietly as water flowed through the channels, noting how the small changes affected different areas. They asked questions, and Liam answered patiently, showing diagrams, sketches, and notes he had kept. Slowly, the rigid expressions of frustration began to soften into curiosity and understanding. Throughout the day, Liam noticed more subtle signs of change. The ducks and fish that had lived in the pond adjusted to the new flow. Small puddles along the paths began to dry naturally as the water found its course. The neighborhood, which had seemed tense and controlled, now felt more alive. People began appreciating the movement of water, the gentle sound of the creek, and the way nature balanced itself when given space. By late afternoon, Liam realized that the lesson was working, not because he had acted forcefully, but because he had acted thoughtfully. He had not caused harm, but he had allowed the natural system to show its effects. And in watching carefully, neighbors and HOA members alike began to see the importance of patience, observation, and understanding. Nora visited again, smiling as she watched Liam explain the flow to a group of curious neighbors. "You're teaching them gently," she said, "not with anger or frustration, but with observation and explanation. They will remember this more than anything else." Liam nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had not wanted conflict. He had wanted understanding, and now it was starting to happen. The neighborhood was learning a valuable lesson about balance, responsibility, and thinking before enforcing rules. As the sun began to set, Liam walked back to his house looking at the creek glistening in the fading light. He thought about the journey so far, the find, the frustration, the careful planning, and the removal of the dam. Everything had led to this moment where understanding began to grow. For the first time, Liam felt a sense of peace. He had turned a stressful situation into a teaching moment, not only for the HOA but for his neighbors as well. He realized that patience, careful observation, and gentle guidance could create lessons far more powerful than anger or punishment ever could. The water flowed steadily, reflecting the soft colors of sunset. Liam smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. The neighborhood had started to learn, and with each passing day, the lesson of balance and understanding would become clearer for everyone. After several days of observation, Liam felt it was time to speak directly with the HOA. He had taken careful notes, recorded sketches, and monitored how the water flowed after removing the dam. The minor puddles, wet lawns, and flowing creek had shown the HOA the real effects of their strict rules. Now it was time to explain it clearly. He requested a meeting at the neighborhood clubhouse, sending a polite email to the board members. He made sure to explain that his goal was understanding, not conflict. To his surprise, most of the board members agreed to attend. Liam felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. This was his chance to show them the lessons the creek had taught him and the neighborhood. On the day of the meeting, Liam arrived early, carrying his notebook, sketches, and a few diagrams. He arranged them neatly on the table, ready to explain everything step by step. The HOA members arrived one by one, some curious, some hesitant, and others looking slightly frustrated. Liam greeted each of them politely, keeping his tone calm and respectful. He began by showing the diagrams of the pond and the dam, explaining how he had built it carefully to ensure safety and balance. The pond was small and controlled, he said. It created a peaceful area for my family and helped regulate the water in the neighborhood. He pointed to the creek on his diagram, showing how water flowed naturally before the dam and how it had changed afterward. Some board members nodded slowly, listening intently. Liam continued. When the dam was removed, water returned to its natural path. This caused some wet areas and puddles, but it also showed how connected the system really is. The water, the lawns, and the gardens all work together. Rules alone cannot replace understanding. He then shared photos he had taken during the removal process, showing the gentle flow of water, the ducks swimming, and the way the ponds and puddles formed naturally. He explained each observation calmly, making sure everyone understood that no harm had been caused. The HOA members looked surprised, realizing that the changes they had panicked about were actually natural and manageable. One board member finally spoke up, looking thoughtful. Liam, we didn't realize how much the dam was affecting the neighborhood's water system. We thought removing it would solve a problem, but now we see it was more complicated than we understood. Liam smiled politely. It's easy to focus on rules without seeing the full picture, he replied. The goal is not to break rules, but to understand the balance between nature and management. The creek shows us that patience and observation are just as important as regulations. Another board member added, we also see that your plan was careful and thoughtful. You didn't cause damage and you monitored the effects closely. That's very responsible. Liam felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had not wanted revenge or conflict. He had only wanted understanding. The conversation slowly shifted from blame to discussion. They began asking questions about water management, the pond's effect on gardens, and ways to maintain balance in the future. Liam answered patiently, showing his notes and diagrams. By the end of the meeting, the tone had changed completely. The HOA members admitted that their initial reaction had been hasty, and that rules without consideration could lead to misunderstandings. Liam suggested a compromise. He would rebuild a smaller, safer dam to maintain the water balance while ensuring that it followed HOA guidelines. The board members agreed, impressed by his careful approach and the evidence he had presented. They realized that cooperation, observation, and understanding were far more effective than strict enforcement without thought. Liam left the meeting feeling relieved, proud, and satisfied. That evening, as he walked home, Liam glanced at the creek flowing gently beside his yard. The water reflected the colors of the setting sun, calm and steady just as it had after he removed the dam. He felt happy knowing that patience, careful planning and respectful conversation had solved the problem. The neighborhood had learned an important lesson, and the conflict with the HOA was beginning to turn into understanding and cooperation. Liam smiled quietly to himself. The pond and the creek had done more than provide beauty. They had taught patience, balance, and the importance of thoughtful action, and now the neighborhood was ready to appreciate that lesson together. After the meeting with the HOA, Liam felt a sense of relief. The board had listened, understood, and even admitted that their strict rules had overlooked the natural balance of the neighborhood. But Liam also knew that understanding alone was not enough. He wanted a solution that would protect the creek, maintain harmony in the neighborhood, and allow everyone to enjoy the beauty of the water system. Over the next few days, Liam worked carefully on a new plan. He measured the creek, studied the water flow, and designed a smaller, safer dam that would help regulate the water without causing any disruption. He also shared his plans with the HOA, showing diagrams, notes, and careful explanations. The board members were impressed by his thoughtfulness and attention to detail. They appreciated that Liam had not acted recklessly, but had used observation, patience, and responsibility to find a solution. Finally, with the approval of the HOA, Liam began rebuilding the new dam. It was smaller than the original, but just as effective. He used smooth stones and logs, making sure it was safe for children, wildlife, and the neighborhood. The water flowed gently into the pond behind the dam, creating a peaceful scene. Ducks returned, fish swam happily, and wildflowers bloomed along the edges. Liam's children laughed as they watched the water ripple, and his wife smiled, proud of his careful work. Neighbors came by to watch the process, asking questions and offering small suggestions. Some of them helped Liam carefully move rocks and clear debris. The community, which had once seemed tense, now felt connected and involved. Everyone began to understand the importance of balance, patience, and thoughtful planning. Even the HOA members visited, observing the gentle water flow and asking Liam questions about the design. After the dam was completed, the HOA agreed to reconsider the $50,000 fine. They recognized that Liam had acted responsibly, thoughtfully, and for the good of the neighborhood. In the end, the fine was reduced significantly, and the focus shifted from punishment to cooperation and understanding. Liam felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that fairness and careful action had prevailed. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but now with a renewed sense of appreciation for the creek and the water system. Paths remained safe, gardens thrived, and the pond behind Liam's home became a peaceful gathering spot. Children played by the water, neighbors chatted along the paths, and birds and ducks continued to visit. The creek flowed naturally, reminding everyone of the balance that existed between human decisions and nature's design. One evening, as the sun set and the sky glowed in shades of orange and pink, Liam sat by the pond with Nora. "It's beautiful," she said softly, watching the water shimmer. "And everyone has learned something important." Liam nodded. "Yes, it's more than just water or a pond. It's about understanding, patience, and fairness. I think the neighborhood will remember this for a long time." The HOA board members even visited Liam's home to thank him for his careful approach. They admitted that they had learned an important lesson about rules, observation, and responsibility. Liam smiled, knowing that the quiet, thoughtful way he had handled the situation had created a lasting impact. Over the following weeks, the pond became a symbol of balance and harmony in the neighborhood. Families enjoyed the view, children laughed by the water, and the HOA learned to consider nature and thoughtful planning before enforcing strict rules. Liam's careful actions had not only resolved the conflict, but had also strengthened the sense of community. As night fell, Liam walked along the edge of the creek, listening to the gentle sound of flowing water. The pond reflected the stars, calm and beautiful. He felt proud, knowing that he had protected the neighborhood, taught a lesson in understanding, and maintained peace. In the end, the situation that had once caused frustration, anger, and a $50,000 fine had transformed into a story of patience, care, and cooperation. The neighborhood had learned the value of balance, and Liam had shown that careful planning, observation, and understanding could create solutions that benefited everyone. The pond sparkled under the moonlight, and Liam smiled quietly. The neighborhood was safe, happy, and harmonious. The creek flowed freely, and the lesson of fairness and thoughtful action would remain. quietly teaching everyone who visited the peaceful, gentle waters.